Everybody, welcome again, to Agile's Workshop Wednesday. By now, I think some of you folks, I kind of see some of the same names from prior sessions, and we're happy that you're finding value in these. Just a brief comment about it. John, you can go to the next slide. Just a brief comment about Workshop Wednesdays and why. So, a lot of what we're doing, it's really based on your feedback. So, we send surveys out every month, to clients, and we ask you your opinion about, first of all, how you're doing and what we can do to help you get better at using FleetCommander. And so a lot of the feedback that you give us through that forum, we use to establish our content for Workshop Wednesday. So it's greatly appreciated. The more feedback that you give us, the better it is for everybody, because we're all here to help each other. You know, excuse me. And as we've mentioned, we're trying to keep this on a schedule, so it's always the third Wednesday of the month from 2 to 3 Eastern. And again, please tell us what works for you and what you're interested in learning about, because that's what it's all about. Before we begin, again, the standards. We do record the webinar, and a copy of the webinar video will be made available along with the slide deck, afterwards. And again, we'll send a link with an email of that. In the email, there's also a survey. So please, oh, please, oh, please, do tell us what you think. It's really critical, that we get, what you want to, first of all, how you're doing and what you need to get better. If you want to show video during the session, it's optional, don't have to. And then we would ask you to mute yourself just to keep some, background noise out of it. And again, if you do, want to make a comment or ask a question later on, you can use your audio or your phone, but not both. The preferred method to ask a question is to use the chat window. So again, we're all in teams. You can see in the very top of the toolbar, to the right of people, the little chat icon. You can click it to show the conversation, and you can type in your question. But when you type in your question, tell us who you are and where you're from. And with that, we've really got a great session, I think, today. One of the big things that everybody always asks about is policies and why do I need a policy? And surprisingly, there's many good reasons why you need policies. And so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about really the policy. I don't want to call it a module, but certainly the policy functionality within FleetCommander today, how you can use it, how you can manage your policy with it, some great things to do with it, the importance of things to consider when crafting your policy, because you have to have a policy before you really start putting rules in place. And so John's going to go through, the importance of it, the top types of policies to consider, along with other kinds of things that you may want to consider depending on what your organization does, how to communicate it to your driver base, as well as enforcement, and then some examples of what makes good policy. So with that, John, I'll let you take it away. Thanks again, everybody, for coming, and we'll be checking in on the chat window as we progress.
Yep. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Thank you, Joe, for that introduction. As we've said in the past, these sessions, what we're doing is we're taking input from you, and then we're mixing that with various experiences. Before coming to Agile Fleet, I worked for Indiana University for 10 years as the coordinator for the university's rental pool. I used FleetCommander daily. And so some of the things we're going to talk about today is based upon that experience. It's also based upon just the general experience of our company from as we've developed our software solution, and learned from various sources on the needs of fleets, and then also with that solution, then learning from our clients and their use of FleetCommander. And so what we're sharing with you today is really based upon experience, and we hope that these are things that you might be able to incorporate into your fleet in regards to the use of policy. As Joe said, this is our general outline on here in regards to that we're going to cover, and why policy is important. Some of the top policies that we would suggest that you make sure that you're using with your fleet, and then how that interacts with FleetCommander, the functionality that we have with the tools that we provide to you in order to communicate your policy to your users, and then as importantly, the enforcement of that policy on that. So we'll go ahead and move on through the slides on that. You know, you might be questioning, do I really need a policy? The answer is absolutely yes. And there are some really strange but true stories that we have come across and have been told over the years. Some of them would make some pretty good Hollywood blockbusters, honestly. I mean, we've heard about a driver who claimed that the accidents were caused by UFO sightings, and that person is still operating fleet vehicles from our understanding. There's situations where there was damage to the interior of a minivan, and the source of that was a 5-gallon bucket of cow eyeballs. Again, strange but true. And without proper policies, you have really little that you can do to recoup the costs of those type of repairs. We've heard also that one particular driver racked up over $15,000 in reimbursements because they used their own personal vehicle rather than using the vehicles from the fleet. And then others that took advantage of the policies in regards to purchasing an actual vehicle for their own use to avoid certain vehicle policies. So yes, policies are necessary. They need to be put into place because of situations extreme like this and some that are not as extreme but still costly. Why is having a policy important? Well, there's a couple of reasons. Policy defines the rules for safe and cost-effective usage of vehicles for your staff and your drivers. Without a policy, there is real no clear-cut direction and expectations for those that are using the fleet. But with a policy, you're able to make sure that everybody is on the same page and all know understand the expectations. Along with that, a clear and consistent enforcement of policies ultimately will reduce your costs and improve your safety. And then without written and enforced policies, every fleet activity truly carries a significant risk of liability. And so you need these policies in place. As Joe actually said when we discussed this matter, he said, if you don't have a fleet policy, you better have deep pockets. And because it also ultimately does come down to what is going to be the cost that you're going to have to incur with not having defined policies. Some of the top fleet policies that we recommend as a company based upon various experiences would be a few of these. Personal vehicle use policy, that the expectation is a fleet vehicle over a personal vehicle for travel. Using personal vehicles increases your cost, impacts the efficiency, and reduces the safety that you have of knowing the fleet vehicles that you have. You understand the wear and tear of those. You understand what you expect to get out of those vehicles. But if you just allow people to use their own personal vehicles, it's a lost cause at that point. Another top policy that we recommend is the policy of having to accurately collect your odometers. Having those odometer readings are crucial. And you need to have them reported and collected on a regular basis in a timely fashion. In doing that will ensure that you have the maintenance is on track for your vehicles to operate efficiently, and it allows you to have that confidence that the vehicles that you're providing as part of your fleet are up to all their services, and thus they are safe to drive. Deferring your maintenance costs money over long term. So having that an odometer collection policy is one that you definitely should enact. Along with that too, a policy in regards to tracking the life cycle of your vehicles. You need to operate your vehicles only up to their optimum economic life. And with a strong policy for that, you can have the tools to manage your TCO and ensure that you're operating your fleet again as efficiently as possible. Another policy to make sure that you have is one in regards to driver behavior. Drivers should reduce their unnecessary idling, speeding, hard braking, other fuel consuming or costly behaviors. Because adverse driver behavior again will increase your maintenance costs, and it reduces the life and increases the liability of your vehicle to your fleet. Some more top policies to consider to enact would be vehicle choice policy. Now, this is one that at IU I know that we had, was that drivers were required to use the best vehicle for the purpose that they were going to be using. That may be the smallest, most fuel efficient vehicle for the job. You should always operate on the right rule, the right vehicle, the right place, the right time. Along with that, also, another policy that we would recommend that you investigate and enact would be a minimum usage for assigned vehicles. Uh, Assigned vehicles, they must be used a minimum number of miles per month, or they'll be reassigned. I know several of our clients that from the state level, they are they have to make sure that a vehicle is operated X amount of miles a month, or it will be pulled. And that policy was hard to enact because they weren't keeping track of the proper odometer mileage, and they ran the risk of losing vehicles that they really should have in the fleet. But when you combine the capturing the proper odometer readings and then making sure that you're optimizing the use of your vehicles through rotating them through the fleet, you can end up having to make sure that you have the vehicles that you need, and then get rid of the vehicles that you don't need. And then finally, a policy again that we had at Indiana University was in regards to accident and damage reporting. It is really important to make sure that drivers account for the damage in a timely fashion, in a defined time frame. Otherwise, what will end up happening is that you will incur those costs. That happened frequently for us, that no one would would they would fail to report damages, and then we couldn't trace where that damage occurred, and thus we end up having to pay the deductible on that. And have a policy that requires people to report damages and incidents, and then that way you can take action on that in a timely fashion.
The other thing too is, as you think about this, a lot of this is dependent upon data. So, to John's point about capturing accurate odometers or making sure that, drivers are doing the right thing in terms of utilization and minimum usage. It's all about how the vehicle's being used. And so having integrated solutions like FleetCommander, like telematics, get you there in a real easy, simplified manner. So, we're all big proponents of how do you make it easy for folks to apply these tools to their operation. Those are a couple of things that you can think about in your world. Sorry, John.
That's okay, Joe. Other policies to consider, in regards to distracted driving and texting, making sure that drivers are licensed, they have the proper training and incentives, to make sure that vehicle access is controlled by the activities and their jobs. Again, limiting or controlling the personal use of company vehicles. If company vehicles are when company vehicles are used, there may be policies that enacted in regards to who can actually be riding in those vehicles, and then also the tax rules that are associated with the personal use of company vehicles. Then there's policies that govern the fuel that is used, and regarding preventive maintenance policies and procuring and disposal of policies. These are all things that you should consider and then put into place and then enforce through FleetCommander. And if you wanted to look more into our suggestions in regards to policies and resources, from our web page, our web site, agilefleet.com/resources, there are several articles that are there for you to be able to take a look at. Now, in regards to communicating your policies and enforcing those policies, we through FleetCommander give to you tools that will help you accomplish this. There's various ways that through FleetCommander you can communicate your policy. You can post your policy on the welcome page. When policy changes, you can make sure that the drivers are always aware right up front when they log into your site. They can see it there, and they can understand that there is a change that has been made or a change that they need to be aware of. In addition to that, You can also use what we defined in one of our previous webinars as zone content. There, as you make a reservation within FleetCommander, you can keep your policy front and center through the make reservation help text. It places it right there as they start their request. They can see right up front that the cancellation policy or any other policy you might want to express. And there's several different places of that zonal content in regards to making reservations. There's the help text, there's the comments description, there is the page that displays which usage type they might be selecting. All those are items that can be customized. And again, those are things that we actually had discussed previously in our former workshop Wednesdays. Along with that too, in regards to communicating policy with your emails, you can place that within the email so that when they receive their confirmation email, they see the policy that needs to be expressed at that time. And of course, you have that flexibility to make those changes as you want to. It may be that you only need to send a message in the email for about a week. Well, set your calendar on that and then go back in and make that change whenever that message is no longer needing to be expressed. The one that we want to focus on though today, though, is specifically in regards to the policy page. With the menu, that when you log into FleetCommander, the policies are displayed right there on the left column. It makes it easy for your drivers to find your policy and makes it easy for them to read that. But it's not just that it being placed here that makes it easy for them to read the policy, but also FleetCommander has some settings and that we're going to show you today that actually requires your users to read this policy as stated on this page. And the policies, when you have them there, they always need to be current and they need to be reviewed. You need to make sure that they're being reviewed by yourself to make sure that they're current, and then also reviewed by the your end users. This is all done through the configure enterprise policy tab within FleetCommander. Previously in regards to configuring our emails and the various pages in FleetCommander, we looked at this portion of the configure enterprise settings. We were focused on at that point on the layout. The policy portion is its own separate tab. I guess as an indicator of how much we consider this its importance is that to make sure that you can it's called out. And so you click on that and it pulls up this view right here in regards to the when you start to customize the layout. The basic tools of changing the content of your policy page is exactly as we covered with the emails and the general page layouts. So you have the WYSIWYG set up using Word-like tools. You can change the fonts, you can change the colors, you can change, justifications. You can have bullet points. All that can be updated. And if you want more information on that, I keep on referencing the former workshop Wednesdays. Please revisit those 2 sessions to help you give you more information on how to change that particular layout function and customization of in FleetCommander, because it does apply for those as well as for this layout page. I mean, this policy page here. The one thing we do want to point out, because it is a little bit different, by default in FleetCommander, the policy page for your, as example for y'all, it includes a table that is hyperlinked. And we just wanted to call that out here within this presentation, that when you start to make those changes, be aware of that hyperlink function. It's a great function to have and to use, because policies sometimes can be pretty lengthy, and once you get down to the bottom of the page, it's a pain to to go back up to the top or find the various sections of that page without a little bit of guidance. And here I'm pulling up here just to show you what that slide represents here. As you can see here, that if you want to read the insurance page, a portion of the policy page, you click on this and it jumps you down to the bottom. And then you also see that there are these icons for going to the top. When you click on that, it brings you back up. So regardless of what portion of the page that you fall into, you can always jump back up to the top there. That's what this is explaining here, is that these are special links. And when you go to, if you're making any changes to the text, or make sure that you're making the proper changes to where this falls within that layout. And when you click on the hyperlink, as the next screen indicates here, it's going to have you specify where you want the page to land when you click on those hyperlinks. That's the only item that is really different in the layout functions that we hadn't covered previously in our former sessions on layout and design. And as we've warned you in that one, and as we say again now, before you begin, make sure that you always uh, make a backup copy of what is currently within FleetCommander, so that you can go back there if the changes you make are not to your satisfaction on that. Now, what's a little bit different on this versus the email changes and the general page changes is that with policy, we give you 3 different options on how to save or those updates. The save change button, as you see on the bottom there, this simply is one that you can use if there's like a typo that you want to make a change and you don't really want it to impact anybody directly at that point. You're not wanting people to acknowledge that there was a change or to the policy. By hitting the save changes, it will allow you to update that, and it's just going to be kind of behind the scenes that you've been making changes, and no one is going to really be prompted or notified of that type of change. That's different than the save and reset policy button. If you make changes to the policy and you want people to be prompted to read the policy again, then this is what you're going to want to do: is you're going to hit the save and reset policy. Now, what that does is it doesn't actually increment it to as a new policy change, but it's enough changes in there that you want to make sure that people have the opportunity or you want them to read those changes. But the main one that we're going to show and illustrate is the idea of the save and increment the versions. This button will make those changes to your policy text and then give a current version number. This is something that you can actually track then what policies and what versions of the policies that your drivers and your requesters have read. And that's done as this. So you can see within that screenshot of the configure enterprise settings policy that you have a current version that's indicated, the version date of that, and then and it's, in this case, it's version 1, and it was last saved on back in 2019. Making changes to this policy, this was, in this case, it says it was, last updated in 2005. If you make changes to the policy and you click the save and increment versions, what will end up happening is this section changes. It gives you then the current version, and it says that the date it was saved on that. That's how you save and increment your versions. Now, how does that impact in regards to your users and their reading and understanding of those policies? Well, that's affected by the policy expiration days, and that's part of, again, policy enforcement. What you'll see here is that within the configure enterprise setting policies, there's this box here that says require users to read policy at login. That's the first thing and foremost that needs to be checked. There's a lot of sites of our clients that do not have this checked, which means they never have their drivers and their users reading their policy. But when you click on this portion within the configuration, it is going to require that that your drivers at least read the policy at some point in time, and that's designated by that policy expiration days on when they and how often that they read that policy. For example, here, there are 3 different types of policy expirations or acceptance frequency. It can be based upon one time after X amount of days, and then if you wanted to, every day. And this provides a timestamp then that goes into your user profiles for your drivers and your requesters. So take a look at this and you see in regards to the one-time acceptance. If you have this checked as the require them to read the policy at login and have it at 0, what will end up happening is that I might have accepted the policy back on 508. At this point, I will never have to accept the policy again after my that initial login and having read that. In the same situation, this policy, Mary accepted back in January. She will not ever have to accept it again because she's done it at that one time at the initial login. And then anyone who's accepted version 1 will never have to do that. And that's not really a best practice on that. It's an option that you can take, but really because you want to have and need to update your policies frequently, you're going to want to make sure that that is reflected within the policy expiration days. So that's when we would use the after X amount of days. In this situation, what would happen is that you set that for 30 days. I accepted it back in 10 days ago, and I'll be prompted again to accept again within 30 days. Mary, she accepted back in January. When she logs in today, she's going to have to accept it, and then she'll have to accept again 30 days later. And if you really want to make sure that people are reading the policies, you can have them read it every single time that they log in. And doing that, you would use a -1, and what that'll end up cause that at any time a person logs into FleetCommander, they will be prompted to read that policy. And this is what that looks like. This is an example with IU when with using their login system, it takes them to this particular message page that you must agree to read the policy to continue. And by clicking this, it'll take them to their policy page. Another way that may be presented is in this fashion here. It'll have this message to prompt the person to read the policy. In doing so, the policy is presented, and then they are required to acknowledge the policy before they can proceed any further into other portions of FleetCommander. Now, are they actually going to read it? Well, there's no technology that I'm aware of yet to actually cause that to happen, but this is, they are attesting that they have read that, and that really is enough, because then within FleetCommander, you have it documented that they at least said they read it. And so if you need to take action, you have the documentation that shows that they did indeed presented with the policy and did accept that policy. And that's shown here within the user profile. When you go into the user profile, you're going to find the date that the policy was accepted, the version that was accepted, and then when that expiration date of that policy, when they're going to need to read policy again. Again, that's through manage profiles and then search for your user, and then you'll find that information. That's one way. If you want to look at a specific person, you can just go into their profile and look at it. But with FleetCommander, we do give you the opportunity to view that through reporting. And the user detail extra report, as is indicated here, is the source that actually shows where each of the users have accepted their policy, along with all the other information that is within a user profile. This is a great report to use. So when I use frequently, it allows you to look as wide as a swath of your users as you want to. You can through the various filters, you can narrow it down to users that were created within the last month or over the last 2 years, or you can filter it by other filters, or you can run them all if you want. That for some of y'all, that wouldn't be the best thing because it's probably going to be 1,000+ users, but you can do that if you want to, and you can do it as an HTML, or you can do that as a Excel file, and then using the filters, filter out information as needed on that. One slide that I skipped just a moment ago. Remember, the only way that you're going to be able to capture this information within the user profile is as long as it's configured within the configure enterprise policy. If you don't have it checked, the require users to read policy at login, that information is not going that's here is not going to be appear within the user profile. And then also, by the way, if you want to, your reminder, you can always upload an image of your drivers to the profile if that's within if your policy of your organization allows for that, capturing those type of things. You can add that to FleetCommander.
You know, the other thing too that you can use this form or that report for is, you know, when you start looking at your drivers and figuring out that you've got a whole bunch of drivers that may not have accepted policy recently, it's a good way to validate the driver against whether or not they're getting reimbursed. So are they trying to skirt the system and not follow, you know, vehicle use policy for the organization and go with the reimbursement? And this is another way that you can see whether or not they've been in the system and when they were last in the system and kind of what they're doing as alternative means.
Mm-hmm. And then one other portion I wanted to point out to you is within the user profile, there is the HR tag, which can be tied into policy acceptance and violations. You have the ability to, you know, add there, you know, what has happened and with that particular user and document when there may be a policy violation and what that may, um, what that what that occurrence was, and have it dated in regards to that. And then with this, there is a report, the HR report, that will then, in the same fashion that user extra details report gives you a printout or an Excel file of the data that you're looking for. Well, this HR report will allow you to track those violations. That's the main part of the presentation. Always consult the Agile Fleet, system admin manual for further details in regards to this and any item in regards to with FleetCommander and its functionality. And I just wanted to run through just a real quick. I've got like 2 minutes. I told Joe I'd take 30 minutes. I got 2 minutes left here. Just some examples. You know, is this your site? We asked that last time. You know, this is the default. This is what is still on some of our clients' sites with this last updated June 16, 2005 on that. You know, this is a policy that is not being maintained or even paid attention to, because this is the default that we place within FleetCommander when we set up your site. You can use the structure of this, and many of our clients do, to express their policy. IU used the zip in the same fashion with those links. They just took out the table with the lines on that and to keep that updated. But other examples, you know, we have one client that uses a really great use of the table function, but using a bar across the top of each of these sections to make the distinguish the various portions. You know, I really liked that when I came across that one. Iowa State, you know, they changed the text and expresses it in this way, and Scott County, you know, it's similar in that they chose to go this direction and even linked some of their policies to other portions of their site. And that is basically what I have. You know, we just want to remind you in regards to, you know, leverage your resources when you go to, you know, to enact or policy or make policy changes. You know, you'll need to, you know, always consult with your risk management, with your legal department, with your HR department in regards to what policies can and cannot be enforced. And then also in general, in regards to, you know, your branding and web development, you know, there may be if you don't feel comfortable making those HTML changes within FleetCommander, maybe you have somebody there within your organization that does on that. So questions? Anyone have
So
any
John,
questions?
Tammy has asked a question, and her
Okay.
question is, who acknowledges the policy if an individual is reserving for another? So for example, an admin assistant is reserving for the director.
Yes, and that's a great question. It is the person logging into FleetCommander. So in regards to policies, your driver, the only way that they would actually be acknowledging policies is if you're operating along with a key control system. With our key control system and the kiosk there, it is your driver who's going to pick up the vehicle that's scheduled for them by somebody else. At that point, the you can, through the kiosk, present your policy, the very same policy that's in here. So you do have that opportunity um, for in that situation. For those that are, doing manual dispatch, that's a little bit more of an issue that you want to have your policy still within Fleet Commander, but it may be that you need to, make sure to express that at the time of key pickup, and have them review that, and and have it documented at that point. And be a similar kind of situation in that if somebody was coming to you and the system shows that their license is expired, Fleet Commander can be configured to tell you during that manual dispatch that the license is expired. Well, you have to take action at that point. So that's what I would recommend for those that are who have drivers that never put in their own request and never actually log into Fleet Commander. Any other ones, Joe?
No. I think you answered Tammy's question. I don't have any other questions in the queue. And Tammy, you are quite welcome. Anybody else, please?
There were a couple of questions that we received ahead of time that weren't directly on topic today, but they actually are going to be addressed by some of our future ones, and we'll reach out to y'all ahead of that and make sure we answer your questions, but and then also incorporate those into our future um, workshops. So if there's not any other questions, then Joe, I think at this point it's yours to take over.
Yeah, no, really. On behalf of Agile, we truly appreciate you all spending, a little bit of time out of your day to meet with us. And again, just remember, we're here to help you in any way you can. So, if you've got, new folks in the organization, if you're, coming back from extended out of the office absences and you need, help with retraining, I know that we're currently working with, a number of clients on that front where they've had organizational changes, between the time they went, um, between the time that they went out with COVID and coming back into the office. So again, those are all really important things to make sure that folks clearly understand how to use Fleet Commander. One of the big things that we see is, we have new staff. There's always a little bit of nuance where folks don't fully understand the process. Things may have been missed. So it's always worth trying to spend some time. I'd also offer, and again, if you take our survey, I would really like to know if perhaps, one thing that you're interested in is whether or not we should, offer or schedule an hour session where we can walk through motor pool or selected tools within Fleet Commander to kind of help you and your staff out on a more regular basis. So that may be something to consider there. And as I said, a lot of the things that John talked about today, vis-a-vis odometers and about maintaining your vehicles, truly it is all about the data. And so some of the things that we see, if you don't have good data, it causes problems in many other places. So maintenance getting delayed, problems cropping into vehicles because things weren't done, vehicles becoming unreliable, et cetera. So again, it's all about trying to get the data in there. And for folks that are looking at billing, again, remember there are 5 standard algorithms that come in with Fleet Commander. So if you're not doing billing and you want to think about it, reach out and we can kind of help you out there. And the last thing is that if you're not using kiosks and key boxes to streamline operations, I know some of you have, students and this and that that provide some of these functions, but it's all about providing the right level of work. So we appreciate all the time that you folks have taken to join us today. John does a great job on this, and we're happy that you could attend. We'll make sure that we get an email out to everybody with a link. And over the next month, we're going to go back into email because email is a complicated topic. And surprisingly, even though we spent a lot of time, at the beginning talking about configuration, we're going to get into a little bit more advanced setup and troubleshooting this time. Feedback is always important for us and for you. And so it's interesting to us that when we, talk to clients and look at your sites and work with you, a lot of you folks aren't using feedback tools in Fleet Commander. And we would strongly encourage that you start taking a look at it and thinking about it. It really helps you to better understand what your user needs and how you're providing a service to the user. And then getting into the August timeframe, we're really going to get into the dispatching. So understanding, dispatching in more detail and how to do auto and manual vehicle assignments. So again, it's real important as you get into it. And we really appreciate your time today. So thanks so much.
Yep. Thank you all very much for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you again this time next month.
Take care, everybody. Have a great rest of your day, and thank you.